Yesterday, we discussed what Jim Knowles thinks about Ohio State's linebackers going into the college football season. Well, what does he think about the Ohio State cornerbacks on the team? We'll discuss that and a whole lot more right here on Locked on Buckeyes.
You are Locked on Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked on Buckeyes, part of Locked on Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Thursday, August 11th in the year 2022, and I want to thank you for making Locked on Buckeyes your first listen or first watch of every single day. On today's episode, we will be joined by Mr. Lauren Cox. He is the host of Locked on Bears as we get some expectations for Justin Fields going into year 2 with the Chicago Bears. But before we get to any of that, we recently heard what Jim Knowles had to say about the Ohio State linebackers on the team and how Steele Chambers and Tommy Eichenberg have kind of separated themselves from the rest of the pack. But what is on his mind when thinking about the Ohio State cornerbacks? We know in the offseason, Legend Cavazos transferred to North Carolina, and we knew that was one player, one young man that was going to be a piece that was hopefully going to be in the rotation this year, that he decided he wanted to go somewhere that he had a bigger role in the defense and he could play immediately. North Carolina with Mack Brown leading that football team, that's the spot he chose to go. But as we look at the team, just take a quick glance at the depth chart, we can quickly see some things that stand out to us. And then when Jim Knowles discusses this very team, there are some other things that stick out that we don't see when we look at the depth chart. Ohio State currently has 6 scholarship cornerbacks on the team. That's it. Cam Brown, Denzel Burke, Kalen Johnson, Jordan Hancock, Ryan Turner, and Jair Brown are the 6. Brown and Turner are true freshmen, so they have not had any playing time because it's their first time on the squad. Then Kalen Johnson and Jordan Hancock are backups, but still haven't gotten the amount of attention that you may want someone to have, or playing time you might want someone to have that's in that role that's going to be a bigger piece of the pie going into the upcoming season. Also, Jordan Hancock left Tuesday's practice via an injury, and now we're seeing a little bit of a different issue than maybe you saw before, which is why when Jim Knowles discussed the depth at Ohio State on this particular position, the depth that this unit has, he sees some things, health issues, depth issues, and he also says it's no quick fix for that to solve those issues. Quote, it's a direct quote from Jim Knowles from when he recently talked to the media. Quote, I think it's long term. I think we're going to have to keep those guys fresh. What are there? 6 scholarship guys, I believe. So we're going to have to dual train. Like Jansen, Cam, they are guys we're going to have to dual train because we're going to get corners who run all the time back and forth. We're going to get the soft tissue injuries, and we need to be fresh. It's definitely something we're keeping an eye on and trying to make sure we get multiple guys their repetitions, end quote. Think about that statement being made week 4, week 5, week 6, where depth is an issue. We're having to cross-train guys starting it in the middle of the season, not in the offseason. And so I kind of like that Jim Knowles, when he speaks, he uses coach speak every now and then, but he gives you the goods. He gives you some nuggets. He gives you some things you can chew on and discuss that are not just your surface level football topics. And for Jim Knowles to realize dual training or cross training players right now is wise and it's a good thing, it's huge. He also went to the secondary coaches to figure out who is wise, who can cross-train from safety and to corner because they need more depth at that position. He mentioned Jansen Dunn and Cam Martinez, 2 guys that are dual training or cross-training, depending on what term you want to utilize with that, right now at the cornerback position. I like Jim Knowles, and I like that he is not shying away from realizing and acknowledging what is reality. Ohio State's depth at cornerback is not good. Imagine this. Don't want to play the scenario for you. Well, Jordan Hancock going out. Outside of Cam Brown and Denzel Burke, Ja'Kalen Johnson, or J.K. Johnson, as some people might call him, he is the only person that's had playing time at Ohio State. Like I mentioned, you got Ryan Turner and Jair Brown are two true freshmen, so they have no playing time. So if they come in, you're throwing guys into the water and just saying, well, it's sink or swim time, and I hope you find a way to swim, because sinking is probably what's going to happen. You don't want those apples. You don't want those problems. Ohio State did probably anticipate well, no, they did not, because they took a scholarship away. But with Sevyn Banks not being on the team this year either, that's another damper. That's another hindrance at Ohio State. And they also said, hey, we're not going to go out and get a cornerback via the transfer portal. There was talks that they were going to get a young man that ended up transferring to Alabama to play a corner, who also got in trouble with the law this summer as well. But they said, no, it wasn't a good fit, and it just didn't make sense for them to bring him in. So here we are right now. Your two starters, they're really good. Your youngest starter, Denzel Burke, might be the best player in your secondary, so that's a huge plus. But then when you add in Jordan Hancock going down, how long will he be out? That's to be determined. Ja'Kalen Johnson got some reps, but you're still really, really thin at that position. I love that the coaches know to do what's right, know to do what makes sense, and cross-train players. Now, in the season, depth at this position could be a problem. I hope it's not. I hope it doesn't become something that's a talking point here on the podcast with you and your boys at the barbershop, at the playground, playing basketball. If you're out at the gym working out, I hope it's not a talking point saying the depth at this position makes me a little nervous going against some of the better competition in the Big Ten Conference. So, depth is a problem. They're working on a solution. Let's see how the coaches put this thing together. Let's see how the coaches figure this thing out. We are going to be joined by Mr. Loren Cox, the host. He is the host of Locked On Bears, as he gives us season expectations for Justin Fields in year 2 with the Chicago Bears. We'll discuss that and a whole lot more. Oh, actually, excuse me, not a whole lot more. It's all Justin Fields next to the rest of the show right here on Locked On Buckeyes. If you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor. Ready, delicious, indulging cookie dough covered in chocolate. That's right. Built has done it again. Let me introduce you to your new favorite cookie dough chunk puffs. Have a light and chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. All of the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it. Plus, it's healthy for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories, and they are a whopping 15 grams of protein in them. That's correct, run to Built.com to snag a box for you and the family. It'll be the perfect treat where you can find a really good hiding place and just hoard them for yourself. Go to Built.com and use our friendly promo code LOCKED15. That's LOCKED15, and you will get 15% off your next order. Once again, go to Built.com and you will get 15% off your next order only at Built.com. Coming up next right here is Loren Cox. This is Locked On Buckeyes. And joining us now here on Locked On Buckeyes, we've taken a little hiatus on our Buckeye road trip around the NFL, getting season expectations for former Buckeyes that are now in the National Football League. But it is QB1 of the Chicago Bears, Justin Fields Day, and here with us to talk about Justin Fields in year 2 with the Bears, it's Loren Cox, the host of Locked On Bears. Loren, how you doing, man? Welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, I'm doing well. Excited to finally have football back in a season around the corner, and a lot of expectations and a lot of eyes on Justin Fields for sure.
Oh yeah, football's here. I'm excited. Got the Hall of Fame game. We got preseason games coming up in the NFL for everybody else, and I'm excited for football. And I'm excited to see what Justin Fields is going to do in year 2, as people are hoping that he has better plays in year 2 than he had in year 1.
Yeah, it's tough because it's like you don't want to throw out the entire rookie season as being, just a mess of Matt Nagy and the organization. But at the same time, it was such a difficult situation for any quarterback to be successful in. And now there's such a turnover of trying to build around him that, again, maybe won't be the ideal situation for a quarterback. But you can't just keep punting and saying, well, we still don't know. We still don't know. At some point, you start to have to kind of hammer some of this stuff out.
Absolutely. How would you assess his play last year during his rookie season in the National Football League?
Yeah, I mean, you can't sugarcoat it and say it was good, but it wasn't maybe as terrible as the stat line might suggest. When you see 7 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 59-ish completion percentage, it doesn't look good. But I think they did not put him in positions to be successful. They did not game plan for him properly. They didn't give him the amount of time to prepare as far as working with starting receivers. He was always the backup, always having to sort of just take whatever scraps were left from Andy Dalton. It was never a good situation for him to go into, but he certainly finished the season stronger than he started it. And throughout the year, I kept coming back to this idea that he always made the difficult things look easy. When he's scrambling out of the pocket and making these tough plays with his legs and finding guys open downfield, or sometimes, play action, set up, hitch, throw it, and fire these tight windows, deep down the sideline, he made some of those really tough throws that you don't expect rookie quarterbacks or even all that many quarterbacks in the league to be able to make. And yet, conversely, he also sometimes made some of the easy things look difficult, that sometimes there were underneath throws that are just quick little timing routes that you would expect most rookie quarterbacks and most, run-of-the-mill quarterbacks to be able to hit. And sometimes he'd one-hop them or throw them a little bit high because the timing just wasn't quite there with his receivers. So I felt like he did the hard things really well, and that it's easier to teach the easy things that he struggled with.
Some of those timing things that you mentioned where the timing may have been off with some of the receivers, do you think that was just rookie season jitters that caught up with him during the season?
I think a lot of it was that, like, he went through training camp and OTAs barely even working with Allen Robinson and Darnell Mooney, like his top wide receivers, so that when he gets thrown in there in week 5, he's practiced with them some, and sort of in that 1 week leading up to the game that he actually was finally, given the full reins of the offense. But it takes some of that fine tuning of like, okay, if you need to throw it before the receiver makes his break, you have to know just how fast Allen Robinson is compared to Darnell Mooney and where you need to place the ball depending on which receiver is running the route and which route that receiver is running. And you have to read the coverage and get there through your progression on the play. So there's so many different moving parts that he just didn't get time to work through and get all those reps to be more comfortable with it. Then on top of it, his offensive line completely falls apart and does not give him time to throw. And the normal bumps and bruises that a rookie might go through, and he gets injured. It all kind of adds up to just not a great situation. It would have been really impressive had he been able to do so. And so maybe he's not some, instant wonderkin type of kit quarterback, but that doesn't mean he can't still be a difference maker for the Bears here in year 2 and beyond.
How do you think the offseason moves the Bears have made will assist Justin Fields to hopefully play better this year?
Yeah, that's been a lot of the criticism, right? In Chicago, it's been, well, they didn't get him with big name wide receivers, and the offensive line doesn't have great great household names. They finally at least corrected some of that right before training camp. They signed 2 veterans on the offensive line that should help shore up a decent amount of the concern there. I don't think they'll be a top 10 offensive line, but I think the offensive line can get the job done. So then it comes down to these receivers. Now they have some injuries there as well. Still have Darnell Mooney. And I think he'll be a great option for them. He looks like he can be a number 1 receiver. They were hoping Byron Pringle could be a number 2, but he has a quad injury that's going to have him miss most of the preseason now. So they might not be as much on the same page by week 1. It's going to take some time for things to ramp up there as well. So I don't think it's a great supporting cast, but I think a better scheme and now what's looking like an improved offensive line can be enough to at least get a good assessment of Fields. They're not going to win 10 games and make the playoffs, but I think you can at least see enough to know whether or not he can be your guy for the long term.
The better players in the more sound offensive line play is one thing that I know quarterbacks will utilize and help them be more confident on the field, because if you don't trust the guys in front of you to block for you, or the guy behind you, or maybe to the side if it's a fullback, to simply help you out. It's still behind with the fullback, but still could be offset either side. If you don't trust those guys to block for you and to keep you upright so you can actually make big boy throws, you're in the back of your mind, you're wondering, am I going to get hit this play? I have to worry about my backside. Is this running back going to get this block? Because if he does not, I'm going to get destroyed. Yeah. If you get a better offensive line that's blocking for you, honestly, some of those throws you mentioned earlier where the timing was off, the timing might be better because he has better confidence in the blockers that are right in front of him.
Yeah, exactly. That position is so critical, especially for a quarterback like Justin Fields. Like all the talk has been about wide receiver because fantasy football is kind of what the context we all have it from.
Right.
Like
right.
Justin Fields can't control what happens after the catch. So as long as he has a platform to throw it and can get it to the spot, you can at least then evaluate Fields. And if his receiver drops it or doesn't do much with the ball after the catch, that'll affect how the offense as a whole performs. But let's give Justin Fields every opportunity to show exactly what he can do so he can be the best quarterback that he can be, even if the receivers aren't going to be there to figure it out. So I agree 100%, especially for a quarterback like him that maybe sometimes has a tendency to hold on to the ball a little too long. You'd like him to maybe get rid of it a little bit quicker, but he wants to make the big play. He's a playmaker. He wants to be the hero and do what he can to carry this team on his own. And sometimes he needs to work on just like, sometimes you got to take what the defense can give you and just get rid of the ball and move on, especially if that offensive line isn't there.
Lauren, interesting you mentioned the ability or the desire that Fields has when he's on the field to occasionally hold the ball too long. That was actually one of my complaints. As great as he was at Ohio State and with the success that he had instantly in Columbus, one of my complaints was he holds the ball too long. I mean, if the timing was quicker, got the ball out just a half second quicker, I mean, you're looking at a quarterback that is a difference maker and would have probably been a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. And so that's just one of my few things that I complain about him. But you're saying the same thing in the National Football League. Year one, holding the ball too long. I don't know if it's the offensive line in Chicago that caused that tendency to enter the NFL, or if it's just that's who he is as a player. I'm leaning towards that's who he is as a player. We just have to live with it. But there may be other factors there that go into why he tends to hold a ball a half second or maybe a second too long.
I just wonder if after his rookie season of getting his butt kicked every game, and he got sacked 9 times in his first game, and the offensive line, and part of it was
9 times?
9 times. Like he
he
got beat up a lot. And I wonder if maybe over time that literal abuse that he suffered maybe speeds up that clock in his head. Like you get worried about a quarterback getting hit too much and then being too quick to run away from the pocket. But I almost wonder with Fields if it could almost be a positive of like, after having gone through that, knowing that he does need to get rid of it a little bit quicker, and that being a good thing for him instead of a bad thing of him going too fast.
What offense do you think suits Fields the best?
They seem to be putting in one that fits his skill set well. And the new offensive coordinator, Luke Getsy, comes over from the Green Bay Packers with the Matt LaFleur offense, and coming out of the Kyle Shanahan tree is going to be a lot of rolling the quarterback out of the pocket. First of all, a lot of running the ball and play action off running the ball, but a lot of those stretch zone runs that he can either, hand it off on that or fake the handoff and roll out the other way, cut the field in half, make the read a little bit easier, and give him that personal run pass option of either going past the line of scrimmage or being able to throw the ball downfield. There was a Bears fan who recorded a play at training camp a couple days ago, or maybe last week, where Fields was practicing a play action rollout, and they superimposed that right next to a play of Aaron Rodgers running the exact same play, and the motion he's doing is identical, where he like fakes the handoff one way and then turns and flips around and rolls right in this really specific play that they were clearly practicing. So a lot of what we see in Green Bay is I think what we're going to see in Chicago, with an emphasis on running the ball in there and making that just a little bit easier on Fields, so he doesn't feel like he has to be the hero to be that super playmaker. If they can give him shorter down and distance situations with running the ball, play action to keep the defense off balance, create a little more time for him to throw and load up those plays downfield, that all seems like a nice recipe for what Justin Fields' skill set provides.
You mentioned Matt Nagy earlier. I was not trying to go down this road, but it's that time of the show to mention a man that was criticized a lot for the way that Fields plays. I can't say so much played, but just the pieces that are around him in the offense and the things that were the plays that were called. A lot of the negative attention was around Matt Nagy. I don't like to point the finger all the time at one person, but it might be acceptable in the situation. Do you think he deserves a lot of the blame for what happened last year?
Yeah, I mean, it is easy to just put everything on him and to say, that was just the coach and everything will instantly be fixed by him being gone. No, they did need more offensive line talent and probably more receiver talent than they had. But the coaching staff in particular seemed so stuck on feeling like they have this scheme and what they know as coaches is going to be the best scheme for winning, and that the players need to fit this scheme. And the idea was like, we're going to make Justin Fields throw some of these short rhythm passes so that they're supposed to be a little bit easier on him, and so that then they can load up to pass the ball downfield. But it was curl route after curl route after curl route for the receivers like Darnell Mooney and Allen Robinson that can win one-on-one downfield so effectively, and just not putting those players in the best position to be successful. On top of, like, Justin Fields' first game when he sacked 9 times, they're still going with 5-man protections over and over again and ran play action a handful of times at most, but they're not doing the things to help the offensive line, to help the quarterback. They're not doing the things to help the wide receivers, to then help the quarterback. And it just was not a situation that was going to be conducive to very much success. It would have had to been Fields overcoming his own coaches in addition to what the defensive coaches were doing against him.
That's not a good way to start off your career in the National Football League. It sounds like it's if there was like a scenario where you're trying to paint worst case scenarios, you have like a plot of 10, and you can only fit 10 scenarios in this little area. I bet you this situation's in there because it just doesn't sound very favorable for Justin Fields during his rookie year with the Bears last year.
Yeah, the regime, like the GM and head coach, kept saying, we have a plan for this quarterback situation. We're planning for these contingencies. Andy Dalton is our starter, and we were expecting Andy Dalton to start the whole season, but we have plans for contingencies. And then Dalton gets hurt in week 2, and Justin Fields goes out there, and they just did everything exactly the same as they had been doing for Andy Dalton. And they just didn't have whatever. Either they had a plan and it was a terrible plan, or they didn't have a plan for the situations as it played out. And it just was. It felt completely unprepared. And then you mix in Fields getting injured a couple of times, some minor things on his own, and not playing 100% out there. And it was a pretty firm recipe for disaster.
I'm going to put some numbers out here for you. I'm going to ask you if we can expect above these or below these for this upcoming year. Justin Fields, above 63% completion percentage this year. Would you guess better, higher or lower?
I would go above, but I don't know that it's going to be a huge number for him, right? He's not here to be the pinpoint accuracy passer, more like the Cam Newton style, get the big plays to make up for the times when maybe it's not pinpoint accuracy, but it's still catchable.
17 starts. I know you can't go higher than 17, but that's where we're going to start at the very top.
I don't think Justin Fields is not durable. He's not injury prone, but given that there were a couple times last season that he was in and out of lineup, and that they're going to have to rely on some of his mobility, it wouldn't surprise me if he misses a game or 2 here and there, but hopefully nothing serious.
That's the only time I'm going to start with a number that you cannot go above in this little scenario. Justin Fields throws over 2,500 passing yards this year.
Oh, I'll definitely put him over 2,500. I certainly don't think he's going to hit, 4,000 or anything like that, but I definitely would go over on 2,500. I mean, he was able to get Darnell Mooney to still be a 1,000-yard receiver last season with everything else going on so poorly. As long as he plays, a good 14, 15 games at least, he'll definitely break that mark.
Over 23 touchdown passes. Over above.
That's a good, 20 is the number I keep coming back to, mainly because I think when they get to the red zone and in the goal line, they're going to hand the ball off. They're going to be very committed to the running game in those situations. And so I don't know that it's necessarily that the Bears offense isn't going to score so few touchdowns, but just whether or not Fields is going to be the one who gets the credit for scoring them. I think if his combined rushing and passing touchdowns, I would break at 23, but purely passing, I would go under.
Okay. Let's just he threw 10 INTs last year. Will he have above that mark or less than that mark this year?
I definitely wouldn't think less, but because 10 in 12 games is a lot, but so I think he'll cut down the rate of interceptions, but he'll play in more games. So I'll say over, just because I think there's going to be some bumps along the way that, it's not always just an inaccurate pass, but sometimes you hit as you're thrown or a receiver drops it goes through their hands, batted pass, things like that. I think I'll go over 10, but I'm not concerned of it being 20 or anything like that.
Last but not least, 4 rushing touchdowns. Would you go over or under for that one?
4 is a good number. I'll go slightly over. I mean, I think I can see him get 5 or 6, but it's not going to be anything too crazy there. But I think they're going to go to some of those options in the goal line too, and maybe he ends up keeping it. And I think his legs are going to be a big part of the scheme. So 4 is a tough number. It's right around there for me, but I'll go maybe slightly over.
Lauren, this has been fun. A lot of fun having you on the show once again. I think we had you on when Fields got drafted. You and I did some stuff at that point. I'm glad to have you back when just talking ball with you. If you could just share some last comments you have about Fields' expectations for the season, good, bad, ugly, doesn't really matter to me. I just want to hear what your final thoughts are about him going into year 2.
I will say the really interesting thing for me this season with Fields is that this new Bears regime has shown more with their actions than their words that they are not tied to any players from the previous regime. And I think that includes Justin Fields. I think this offseason, they're by all means, they're building around him. They're doing everything they can to give Justin Fields every opportunity to be successful. There's been weird murmurings and speculation that maybe the fact that they haven't put wide receivers around him means they don't trust him. No, I think they do trust him and want him to be successful this season. But if he is not, and if he has a bad year and really struggles again, I wouldn't be surprised if the regime either moves on from him or at the very least brings in competition. I don't think they're married to him because they didn't draft him. If they're bad and have a top 5 pick and there's another quarterback there, it wouldn't surprise me at all for the team to draft another quarterback and say, Justin, we gave you the chance and we wanted you to be successful, but you're not our guy. You were the last team's guy. And if they're great, they'll definitely love him and keep building around him, do everything. But nothing is guaranteed to him, I don't think, much beyond this year.
Lauren, if you could, let everyone know where they can follow you on Twitter, and maybe they want to check out Locked On Bears and see and hear, Andy, maybe watch some of the things you're saying about Fields right now. Where can they catch you and the show?
Yeah, of course. You can find Locked On Bears wherever you're finding Locked On Buckeyes right now. All the podcasting apps, YouTube, etc. You can follow the Twitter show, the show on Twitter at Locked On Bears, or me on Twitter at Cox Sports One. I always say it's like Fox Sports One, but with a C.
I like it. You guys can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. Happy to have Lauren Cox back with us. Happy to continue our Buckeye road trip around the NFL. And happy to get an update on Justin Fields. A lot of you I saw on Twitter were highly upset last year with how Fields was handled in Chicago. I'm hoping for better plays in year 2 with him as he leads Chicago Bears in his sophomore campaign in the National Football League.